to introduce my friend and an extended colleague in a way, Dr. Atanu Bhattacharya, who will be talking to us on digital literacy / pedagogy. Will the Twain meet? Quite an interesting topic. So before I request Atanu to start, I'll just give a brief introduction to my friend. Atanu studied at JNU, Jaipur National University, New Delhi. Jawaharlal Nehru University. I get confused with our JNU in Jaipur. And University of Warwick. He also is presently working with the University of Leeds on a project which is named MobiGam project. He is right now working in Center for English Studies, Central University of Rajasthan, Gandhinagar, Gujarat. And he is also working in discussion list as a discussion list moderator with IEFL Research SIG. So with this, I request Atanu to take over.
Yeah, thank you, Sanjay, for the introduction, and a very good afternoon. Thanks for coming along. So the form that the presentation is going to take is more or less my own experiments. Sounds a bit Gandhian, but my own experiments with technology and my own experience of using technology, and how do we deal with technology that is there outside the classroom. So that is what I'm going to look at during the presentation. So I'll just give you a brief outline of what I'm going to do. I'm going to look at digital literacy. I'm going to look at pedagogy as if, because one thing that Nikki was mentioning in the morning is they don't seem to coalesce together. They seem to be in two different fields altogether. So I'm going to look at digital literacy and pedagogy, and I will look at them through what I term as frames. Frames in the sense of how do we encounter, how do we see technology, or how do we see pedagogy. So I'm going to look at it from the point of view of frames. I'll explain the term frames a bit later. The second thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the unfortunate but rather existent distinction between what is being increasingly seen as instrumental forms of digital pedagogy and social forms of digital practice. So there are certain things that are happening outside the classroom, which I will call the social practice, while there are certain things that are being used in the classroom in the form of technology, which I will call instrumental use of technology. Again, I'll elaborate on this later. The third thing I'm going to do, and this is from my own practices, from my own writings, and I'll talk about the instrumental use of technology with which I started with. And I'm going to talk about a few practices that I've been involved in. I'll also talk about examples of social that, again, I have been interested in extremely in the last couple of years. How do my students see technology? What do my students do with technology? And how do I interact with that usage? So I'm going to look at the social use of technology by my students, and then see whether we can have an integrated framework for pedagogy. So that's the overall plan. We will finally end with possibly some directions for pedagogy and how to integrate the instrumental and the social. So that's what the plan is. Now, what do I mean when I say that digital literacy and pedagogy has certain frames? And what do I mean by that word, frames? Now, a frame is a word that, for example, Judith Butler uses in terms of how do we understand the world. So there are certain frameworks that are available to us in understanding the world. And we also understand technology using certain frames. For example, as a teacher, I may have certain perceptions about technology, I may not have certain perceptions about technology, or I may use technology in a certain form in the classroom, I may not use technology in a certain form in the classroom. And I think these issues have been more or less covered during the debate. What do the teachers do? Can the teacher be replaced in that sense? So when I use the word frames, I'm primarily using it in terms of ways that we perceive technology as a part of pedagogy or not. Now, there are two dominant metaphors that you can find in the literature about these frames. So there are two dominant metaphors, and they kind of take you to two different research traditions. And that is important for us to look at as teachers, as teacher educators, that what are these two dominant metaphors that is there in literature. Now, one of the metaphors, and I'm using the Warsaw term over here, but Meskel before him used it, is that of the magister, where there is a educational authority who is in complete control and who introduces technology in a certain form in the classroom. I guess in India this is a very common practice, where decisions are taken at as a top-down model, where administrators decide that certain money has to be pushed into schools, into colleges, into universities. And I was just writing about what is known as the National Curriculum Framework, which has a full section on how much money has to be allocated for technology. You look at the National Knowledge Commission, they have a whole section on ICT and teaching. Now, obviously, ICT is seen as a major force for transforming pedagogy or transforming teaching in that sense. And this comes mostly as a top-down model, as something that has been determined by the administrators, and the teachers are the mute spectators who have to follow it in some way or the other. Okay. The second tradition which is available, and the second metaphor that is available to us, is that of the pedagogue, where the use of technology is more or less learner-controlled, and the teachers kind of are there, they are not disappeared, but the teachers kind of align themselves to these practices that students involve in, or teachers design certain practices that align themselves with practices that students are involved in. So the two traditions that we have, the top-down and a more bottom-up, if I might call it, approaches lead to two different kinds of research traditions. And if you look at the research literature, there are almost two different streams. The first one I'll call the magister or the experimental tradition. And this generally leads to a very quantitative kind of research, where it is more of, if treatment X, then learning outcome Y. Here the teacher predetermines, this is, for example, I'm going to teach writing skills to my students. What do I do to teach writing skills? I identify the sub-skills of writing, and then I create materials, for example, in a blog. I ask students to write on a blog, and then I assess that and see whether the intervention of the blog has been useful in teaching my students a certain kind of writing. So the magister tradition gives this treatment X, therefore outcome Y. The pedagogue tradition, interestingly, is much more qualitative. It does not really tell me what the students have learned, but I can find out from their narratives, from their stories, from the stories that they tell me, from the experiences that they share with me, what they have learned during a certain process. And therefore, what I am trying to do through the pedagogue tradition is trying to understand the micro world, while the magister tradition is much more of a macro world, where as a teacher I decide on something, a certain kind of a learning outcome, and then I give a treatment. It's a very experimental method. I give a treatment, and then at the end of it I find out whether that treatment has been successful or has not been successful. For the pedagogue tradition, the micro world is what I need to understand as a teacher first. What is the social practice that my students indulge in? I think in the morning plenary, Julian Edge was talking about this, the social justice angle, the social necessities that they come from, the socioeconomic, the socio-political backgrounds that they come from, and then probably design whatever materials that I have. So it's much more qualitative in that sense. Therefore, this leads to an instrumental use of technology for pedagogy, and I'm going to give you 3 very quick examples of the instrumental use that I have been engaged in with my students, or a more social or situated use of technology where my students are engaged in certain practices and I'm looking at those practices and seeing whether they can be part of the frame of my pedagogy. I'll give examples from both instrumental and social. Start with instrumental. This is what we did long time back in 2010, which in technological terms is almost like a century, because the world has changed over the past 3 years. But this is what we did with our students. We used blogs. Now, why did we use blogs? Because we wanted to improve their writing, but we also wanted to bring in something called process writing, collaborative writing, where I would ask my students to collaborate and then put up a piece on the blog. The general methodology I'll describe later, but right now I am using a blog with my students. I'm teaching a course called Digital Humanities and Cyber Culture. And so the use of the blogs are primarily to produce a lot of collaboration, a lot of talking amongst ourselves. The second picture that you see is that of Mobigam, a project that I've been involved in the past 1 year with colleagues in University of Leeds, and we are looking at how people use their mobile phones. So, I mean, it has got a pedagogic framework in the sense of what do people do with their mobile phones? And I think not many people have really looked at this angle. What do people really do with their mobile phones? And do we need to redefine concepts of literacy? Just to give you a very, very short example, we went into a village which was in the middle of nowhere, actually. And then we interviewed a farmer who had a mobile phone, a very basic mobile phone, and we asked the farmer, what do you do with the mobile phone? First of all, are you literate in that sense? I mean, literacy parameters. Do you fulfill the literacy parameters? And the farmer said, no, I never went to school. So then we asked the farmer, how do you use a mobile phone? What do you do with your mobile phone? So he said, I make calls, I receive calls, that's all that I do. I said, when you have to make calls, you have to read names. How do you do that? So the farmer said, well, I know the first name is this, the second name is this, so it's all in a list. So I said, what happens when you add a name to this? Because obviously the order changes. He says, I change the order in my mind, so it doesn't matter. And the interview was over, and we were all very happy about it. And we shut the tape recorder down. And as it often happens in research interviews, the most interesting thing is always said at the end of the interview when the tape recorder is shut off. So this farmer is leaving, and he comes back and says, oh, I forgot to tell you one thing. And I say, what? And the farmer says, well, you know there are SIM cards in mobile phones? I said, yes, yes. So I have put another SIM card in the pump of my field, which is 3 kilometers away from my home. And what I do is, if I don't, it's very hot sometimes in Gujarat. If I don't have to walk to my field, I give my pump a missed call, and the pump starts. And after I give it a missed call again, the pump stops. So my fields are watered without me going to the field. Now, obviously, something very, very interesting is happening over here, because we need to define what do we mean by literacy now. Do we apply the same parameters of literacy in today's digital literate world? With this story, I'll just move on. There are many other interesting stories that I could share with you, but maybe during the question answer sessions, I'll deal with them. So what did we do? What did we do when we used blogs? We posted topics which were structured, and this was a very, very instrumental use. We wanted to teach them writing skills and collaborative skills, so we posted topics. They were very structured topics, and students were asked to write on the topics, on the blogs. They had their own blogs, and they were supposed to look at each other's blogs and cross-comment. So they commented on the topics at the individual level at first. So all the students individually had to comment on the blogs. Remember, the operative word over here is had to comment on the blogs. There was no option, because this was a graded assignment. There were cross-comments, so they were asked to look at each other's comments, and they cross-commented. And then we, as teachers, we worked in a team. It always works much better if you are working collaboratively yourself in these kind of environments. So we worked as a team. 3 of my colleagues together looked at the comments and then gave feedback, and the students revised whatever they had said and put it back on the blog again, and this is how it went on. We have written about this. It is up there on the ELT journal, sorry. It was published in 2010. we also used very, very low tech, and I'm talking about, I do not come from a very high tech environment. I used to teach in an institution which was extremely low tech. My students used to come from very, very disadvantaged backgrounds, socially, economically, and I'm looking at extremely low tech resources. The second thing that we did was using groups, and again, an instrumental use of technology. And this is a group that we created called the ELT Vibrant Group. This was named by the students, not my name. And then we added all these students to the groups, and every week, all that we teachers used to do was post an article on these groups. Mostly, they were articles that were of a popular nature, taken from newspapers, online e-zines, and was dependent on the kind of student interest that they had. For example, we had done a survey before we asked them to come on the group about the kind of interest that they have. So some people said on films, on music, on et cetera, et cetera. So we used to post articles on it. And then once they had read the articles, they would comment on the articles. It's more or less a similar framework, and then move on to cross-comment. So this was the kind of cycle that was created. So teacher and students also posted articles. It was not simply the teacher posting articles. The teachers and students posted articles with discussion prompts. So there were certain discussion prompts, discussion questions that were given. The students commented and cross-commented. There was a feedback, generally by the teacher at the linguistic level, as well as at a more general level. And the students revised and resubmitted. And there were comments and cross-comments. Again, and we were very happy because we thought that some amount of collaboration was developed through this process. The third thing, and this is what right now I'm doing, is using the mobile learning platform called Edmodo, which you can use on your mobile phones. And what I generally do is, it looks like this. And your students can, it's a anytime, anywhere technology. So your students can use it, comment on it, discuss on it anytime that they wish to. And again, more or less a similar framework, but so we initiate, generally it's initiated by the students, depending on what they want to discuss, to initiate a discussion on a certain topic. We share a time. Now, this we found after 2 years that sharing a time is very, very important, primarily because otherwise people keep on commenting and your mobile phone keeps on whirring and buzzing all the time. So we share a time where we kind of decide that, okay, during this time we'll all come online and then we'll have a discussion online. And then we respond to discussions, and this is an anytime, anywhere technology. So what are the features of this instrumental use of technology? And I'll tell you, I gave you these examples because I'm going to take now matter from these examples to show how we completely neglected the social when we used it in an instrumental fashion. As a teacher, my focus was teaching writing or teaching discussion, and I completely ignored what was actually getting said on these spaces. And that is what we'll look at when we look at the social usage of technology. Anyway, what are the common features of instrumental practice? I'll go through this very quickly. This is mostly teacher-initiated and teacher-controlled. It's mostly. Sometimes students do take initiative, but it's mostly, if you have not posted an article on a certain week, the students might not take the initiative to actually post an article and start a discussion, because it is seen more as this is the teacher's job. This is the educator's job, not my job. My job is to comment. My job is not to initiate a discussion. The second thing is technology, digital technology is seen more of as an achievement medium. You want to achieve certain goals at the end of a project or at the end of an assignment. So the goal is preset in that sense. So the goal is, for example, teaching writing or teaching collaborative skills or teaching discussion skills, etc. And at the end of it, you kind of assess it by saying, have they learned it or have they not learned it? Okay. So it is a preset achievement medium. And this is what I've been trying to say. Learning outcomes are generally predetermined: autonomy, writing skills, discussion skills, etc. So you kind of predetermine what you want to use the technology for, and you choose the appropriate technology which can create these kind of environments where they can engage in these kind of practices. Now, let me go to the social part of it. And before I go to the social part of it, I would like you to watch a video which actually had gone viral. And I'm pretty sure that some of you might have watched it. And what has happened in between this instrumental use of technology and the social use of technology is that we have, as teachers, especially as a teacher myself, we have lost kind of track of what our students are engaged in and what are they really doing with the technology, because technology is invading their lives in a certain sense, and they are more or less with technology, at least with a mobile phone. And this is another story that I would like to share before we watch the video. When we did a survey of mobile phones of our students, it was about 250. Most of them had a basic phone. The same students, a similar group of students who are coming to us now, have mostly very cheap smartphones which can enable a lot of apps. So the world is, in a sense, changing, and the way my students are interacting with technology. So what do I do then? But before what do I do then, this has happened.
Stuck under his car. Like, who knows how long he was driving. I saw him pull out of the parking lot and turn right, and the box was still stuck under his car. So who knows how long he was driving with that box under his car. I bet he got home, he pulled into his driveway.
Cloud in the sky. I'm not. Wow. You're like, it's not.
I don't think it's real. I don't think it's
maybe
real.
Did I see the lineup for car? Wasted. The Empire State Building is like really close to it, so it's a good.
I'm sorry if it is a bit sad video for us as teachers, but this is a very common practice among our students. The mobiles are there, and what we generally do is we kind of approach this with a very, very top-down mindset, in the sense of, I have visited quite a large number of institutions, for example, where in very, very big, bold letters outside the media lab, it will be written, "No chatting allowed." Mobile phones have to be completely switched off. Of course, they don't switch off their mobile phones. There are ways of negotiating all those diktats that have been given to them. But the almost ubiquity of mobile phones across the world has probably change the way we look at technology. And therefore, how do we move from here to a certain pedagogic framework using the social? I'll give you some examples. I'm sorry for those who do not understand the Hindi. I'll try to translate the sections which are there in Hindi. So let's move on to see how technology operates at the social level as a social practice. These are some texts, and these are texts, not SMSs in that sense, but also from WhatsApp, which my students send to each other. So I requested them if they could donate some of their texts without editing them. So they were kind enough to donate some of the texts, which I'm sure was kind of pre-edited in the sense of certain things were not given to me. But I collected around 250 text messages. I've just taken 4 of them, but even those 4 of them are very, very interesting. This is the first one, which I can't translate. If someone can, please do, because I don't understand what is happening over here. What is it? I don't know. It's Assamese. I teach in Gujarat. I don't have Assamese students at all. But I can understand what the last word means. It's a very colloquial way of saying whatever. So it's avai, which is a very Bollywoodish term that has been popularized by certain films. And it basically means whatever. Okay. I don't really know. I probably know what the first word means, which is a way of address. So bay. But if you could help me out after the presentation in translating this, it will be a great, great help to me. There's the second one, and I'm going to talk about this in a bit more detail later. I'll just read out, hey, ran out of balanced skull, presentation was good, and turkey was lovely. We don't really know whether she's talking about the meat or whether she's talking about the country. Glad you're feeling a little better. Where are you now? Okay. Now, the first thing that strikes all of us is the extreme amount of multilinguality that this has. Okay. This is the third one. No, that's fine. Ye to mujhe mail dikha nahi. I haven't seen your mail yesterday. Exam ke baad hi karungi. I'll look at it after the exam. You mail me when you can. No hurry. Right? And this is the best, I thought. I'm sleeping. Zzz. Now, why would someone text if they are sleeping? And why would I let someone else know that I'm sleeping if I'm sleeping? Now, obviously, something more is happening over here. It's not stating a fact or stating an opinion. It is not a representative in the Searlean sense. It is not one of those speech acts where you state a certain opinion. So what am I doing over here? And this is what I could think of. So what's happening here? There is, of course, a multilinguality. There is, avai is a Punjabi word, which I realized later. There is a multilinguality, but there is also a multi-context. There is, depending on the context that a person is, the multilinguality changes its form. Okay. I have a set of SMSs that they had sent to me, which were not multilingual at all. They were all in English. But the moment they go back and text among their friends, what are they doing? Is this some sort of a solidarity principle that is working over here? Showing solidarity by saying, I know the lingo. Showing solidarity by saying, well, we have the freedom to use different languages over here, which we might not have when we send a text to a teacher. I mean, these are questions, not offering solutions over here. There are lots of fatigue markers to express relationships. Be, hey, nana. Nana is, of course, not just no, but also indicating that I am with you. So there are these kind of things happening. There are expressions of solidarity. I'm sleeping. So I'm sleeping obviously is not stating a fact, but it is saying, I'm sorry, I'm sleeping, I'll get back to you later. So And the zzz, of course, is a way of showing that solidarity, a way of showing that please don't mind. So instead of writing that, I just write zzz and indicates I'm sorry about this. There are multiple punctuations, the obvious ones, non-standard spellings, though not very common. And with technology developing, I think they are going to disappear completely, because now you have the swipe function. So you don't really need to type out a word anymore. You just need to swipe your hands over your screen, and then it types for you. And you get the correct spelling. You have graphic emotions and all sorts of things. So how do we capture this in our pedagogy? How do I engage with this as a teacher or as a teacher educator? Or do we want to? Do we really want to? Because in a large number of teacher training programs and teacher education programs, one of the most common things is my students write because as B, C, or Z. Or they have completely forgotten the standard spelling altogether, etc. So how do we deal with this? How do we deal with these questions when you go for teacher education? How do you deal with them? Because this is something that is entering the classroom. It's nothing to do with outside the classroom. They're entering practices, they're entering classrooms. Or here, and I'm sorry, I'm going to torture you with a long piece of text, but I thought it was important. This was an article that was posted on the group, and this was a review of Slumdog Millionaire. And the students commented on it, and a certain student, we'll see, had commented on it, and she said a very, very interesting thing. She said, and I'll read this out, and this is the student comment. Shubhra Gupta, she was the reviewer of Slumdog Millionaire. Shubhra Gupta has critically analyzed all the aspects of the movie in a review. Slumdog Millionaire is one of present year's movies which shows somewhat implausible love story in one moment and real world, I'm sorry about the spellings, I mean this is how it was there, real world tragedy in the other. Since I haven't watched the movie, it becomes very hard for me to comment on this review. This comes at the end of a review where she has reviewed in 2 paragraphs the movie. And this comes at the end of the review. This is the last paragraph of our review. So the teacher says a very interesting thing. The teacher says, I liked some of your comments, and especially the one when you say that since you have not watched the movie, it would be difficult for you to comment. However, there is a puzzle that I could not solve. You say that you have not watched the movie and yet make a good appraisal of the movie in your first 2 paragraphs, where you seem to be aware of the story and its characters. How did you find that out? And then there is a huge amount of traffic, because then the student gets back to the teacher in a reply to the teacher tab saying that I found this out from the Wikipedia. It's all available there. And it's been talked about all over the place. I saw clips of it on YouTube, and that's how I found it out. So the teacher says, okay, fine, that's nice. But in the meantime, this has become a problem, because the friends have latched on to this comment and they have started criticizing her. How could you do a review without watching the movie? And she feels extremely hurt about it. So the student says, after she feels hurt about the comments that she got from her friends, from a critical friend, she says, I have posted my critical comments and some friends of our group have sent their opinions about my critical comments, but I won't give them my cross comments, because those who have sent me their cross comments, they should read sir's comments given to me. I would like to say thanks to them who have given their cross comments to me. This is what she says. Okay, I won't talk to you. So the person who was criticizing says, my dearest friend, it's good you have shown. Now, what do we see over here then? I'm sorry about the long pieces of text with an unreadable font size. Now, what is happening is we need to look at this social situated practice that is taking place. And we need to understand how this social situated practice operates. So there is a certain kind of a flaming that is happening. People get angry. There is a negotiation with no teacher intervention at all. There is a navigation of certain kinds of identities, because a certain identity is getting threatened, and how do you negotiate this identity that is getting threatened on a web space? And there is an awareness of community, that this is a discussion group, and therefore you need to have certain rules of the real world to operate over here as well. So discussion has to continue. So there is a sense of a community that is slowly emerging. So again, how do we capture this in our pedagogy? How do we deal with this? How do we deal with these kind of practices that are happening? Or do we need to? And that is the question. Sanjay, are we doing good for time?
Yeah.
Another 10 minutes? Another 10 minutes, okay. I think I'll finish before that so that I can take some questions. So what are the common features of social practice? We have seen the common features of instrumental practice. Now let's see what the common features of social practice are. It seems to be a situated practice. Kalyan was talking about it yesterday in his presentation, where the practice seems to be situated within a certain usage, certain context within which students live. And this is what Blomeat calls the practice where a certain voice emerges. A certain voice that we teachers are probably not listening to at all because we are more towards the instrumental side of technology or using technology for pedagogy. And this can produce narratives of use, and these narratives are extremely important for us to understand and to probably engage with in a certain way. Because if we engage with these narratives, probably it will become a bit more rich. We'll come to that point later. Now, social uses are not pedagogy-driven, but they are context-driven, because the flaming that we saw was not, it had nothing to do with teaching. It had to do with negotiation of a certain kind of an identity. It was not meant for teaching at all. And we completely ignored it when we took the data from this, because we thought this is something aberrant. This is something we are not interested in, because what I was interested in was what my students were commenting and whether their writing was developing. I was not interested in the social practice that they were engaging in when they were commenting. The linguistic resources, and this is again something that Julian Edge mentioned in the morning plenary, is it forms a wide range. And multilingualism is a reality that we need to probably engage with very, very closely when we engage in a teacher education framework. Because we unfortunately have not been able to engage with multilinguality because of various reasons. Because one of the major reasons that, for example, Kanagaraja talks about is the internal diaspora. For example, a Bengali teacher going and teaching in Gujarat who doesn't know the local language. How do you deal with multilinguality over there when the teacher himself or herself is not aware of the languages spoken in the region? There are rules of engagement, and the rules of engagement are that of an emergent community. So it is more about community rather than about individual learning. It is more about community negotiations, community learning, etc. Now this is something that we proposed where certain kind of pedagogic exchange can happen. Now what do I mean by pedagogic exchange? Now, in a certain sense, the instrumental or the way, for example, if I use technology in the classroom at all, in a certain manner, or whatever I teach in the classroom, will have to take into consideration the way, I mean, this is not something new, and this is not something very, very revolutionary. We have had large frameworks which was meant to take into account learning styles, learning factors, the socio-political economic situations that the learners come from, etc., when we design our pedagogy. But this is especially true, and this is getting more and more sidelined, I believe, when technology is being brought into the classroom. As if technology is seen as a mere tool which can revolutionize the classroom and it can teach students in a certain manner. There are certain ways that students engage with technology, and we need to understand that, and there has to be an exchange, therefore, between the way socially they practice it and the way we create pedagogic frameworks out of it. So there has to be some sort of an exchange over there. So finally, the instrumental and the social, therefore, needs to interact in certain ways. I'm not saying, please teach SMS language in the classroom. But then I'm also not saying don't teach it. My question is, why not? Why not make our students aware of different possibilities of language? Language has never been stable. As Crystal has shown, the word LUV, actually, which we kind of think as an aberration, has been there in the Oxford English Dictionary since 1878. So language has changed. It is not something that is static, and therefore we can engage with it if our students are practicing it. The classroom and the world needs to coalesce, which is something that is very obvious. The magister and the pedagogue need to come together. They need to be together in a certain sense, that magister as a top-down and pedagogue as a bottom-up will have to find some sort of a middle ground where policies, teacher education policies, and student practices probably need to be taken care of at the same time. And this will possibly produce a richer classroom, hopefully, in a sense of if there is a bit more exchange between what the students do and what the teacher framework is, they will produce a bit more rich classrooms than we have currently, especially in the technology context. Produce a multidirectional research, so not only in terms of if I use this, what will happen, rather than when I use this, how do the students practice it? So it will lead us to multidirectional, probably, research in multilinguality. And this is a big claim, but probably digitalize pedagogy and pedagogize the digital. And I think that is something that we need to think of seriously, where both of them can come together. So digitize it, but also make sure that the pedagogic is a part of that digital, and the digital is a part of pedagogy. I'm sorry about the title that has been printed. It says the Twain's meet, which is a bit of a genitive, which I didn't mean to. But I hope if we can do this, when the instrumental and the social come together, we can have the famous line by Kipling, and then the twain shall meet. So that's about it. So thank you for your attention, and I can take questions.
Thank you, Atanu. Here we had Atanu talking about the magistrate tradition and the pedagogue tradition. Quite fascinating terms for me. He also talked about the instrumental and social needs to interact using blogs and mobiles. And we need to learn a few more things about this Mobi Gam that Atanu just mentioned, and the project that he's working on. The presentation that you gave when you were showing that video, I was reminded of an article here where this selfie has come up, selfie, the word selfie, where the students were trying to take that photograph. So how vocabulary is also changing, that is also one of the important things that technology is trying to ensure. We also came to know about the common features of social practices, and thereafter how language is dynamic and changing. Before I leave the house open for questions, I have one question here, and I'm curious to know one thing. There are orthographical, lexical, and syntactic distortions that you yourself mentioned in your presentation. Through mobile messages and also emails. So how do you think this pedagogic exchange means through these, how can pedagogic exchange happen? And don't you think digital literacy is in a way distorting the learners?
Do you want to answer now?
Yeah, you can take the questions, and we can have the questions all in one go, and then you can answer them. So if we have other questions, so Atanu can take all the questions in one go. Do we have any other questions, please? Yeah.
Thank you, sir. So from the examples you have cited, It seems that the students are aware of the language. Though they have used the local languages, they manage to spell them. But what about the students who are unable to present in language, which they don't understand till now? Because this problem is there from the school days to the college days. So would you please focus on that?
Sorry, so you're asking whether students who do not have language, how do they deal with it?
I would like to comment on, I have a comment on this. I'm a principal of English medium school where students come at 6th standard and we run it up to PU levels. And one day the same issue was there in the staff room with the staff. So children are writing, instead of Y-U-E, they are writing just U, and R. For T, they are using T. Our H-O-U-R, they are not writing, only HR writing. What to do? Shall we cut the marks or anything? What to do? You guide us. This was the question in my staff room practically. Then I said, who is annoyed with this? Social studies teacher said, they convince me well when they write this language. So I'm more comfortable with them. And I'm happy that they are at least using the abbreviations and they are conveying me the message. But language teacher was very much annoyed. They must learn the spelling and they must write proper spelling. Unless they are writing proper spelling, I'm not going to give them marks. Then I said, you cut the marks, language teacher. And social studies teacher, you're not bothered about the language, you are bothered about the content. So give the full marks. And this practice is happening in my school. We are accepting the language in matter of science, social studies and mathematics. This language we are accepting. And in matter of English language, because they are learning English as first language, their mother tongue. So we are cutting the marks. This is the practice we have adopted in our classrooms. Thank you.
I think I'll just take these three and then take another round. Otherwise, I'll forget the questions. Sanjay asked whether digital literacy kind of distorts a certain... So I'll take your question. I think they are kind of related questions, all the three. So I'm trying to answer the questions jointly. I would say that distortion is a very strong word to use over here. Primarily because whenever new technologies have come in, I mean, if you look at Gutenberg revolution, when the print technology came in, the first group of people who were extremely anxious about it were the teachers. Because right now, the model of pedagogy changed. In 1453, when the printing started invading all corners of Europe, the major problem was the teacher lost control of knowledge because now they were available in local languages. There were huge amounts of translations happening. Local languages could make a certain kind of knowledge that was part of the pedagogic framework available to the masses. And you could go back to that debate for 100 years, it raged on. So when we are entering the digital age in that sense, and we must remember it is very, very new. It is not something that has come to us for 50, 80 years. In India, in a sense, it's only after 1999 that we have access to internet with decent speeds. We have access to a certain kind of technology in the form of computers, for example, or ICT support, only very, very recently. Now, what we can do as teachers or teacher educators is probably track it, and possible researchers and policymakers, as ma'am was saying, to look at that and see what the best practices are. I think one of the terms that gets used nowadays is bright spots. I think your example, ma'am, is a bright spot in that sense. And learn from those experiences, because as a language teacher, we need to understand that language changes. And language has changed over hundreds and thousands of years. It has never been static in that sense. So when, as a situated social practice, students use it, then and if the students are carrying it over in a certain form in their actual academic practices, then as a teacher, we need to be aware that there is a distinction, and the students are aware. I mean, a student never speaks the same language in that sense. The student speaks in a certain way with their parents, they speak in a different way with their friends. So there are different registers available to the students. As teachers, all that I can do is, as a teacher, is consciousness raising by saying that, well, that's a register that you use in a certain space, but you don't use the same register in a different space. But I can't wish away that register because it exists. It is a part of a certain digital world, and you can't really wish it away by saying, oh, see, they are spelling it as WHR, or they are spelling it as U rather than YOU, because it exists. It has taken a certain shape. And if you don't speak that lingo in that space, then you are a backward-looking moron, actually.
I agree with what has been said, but it's extremely painful dilemma for somebody who writes in this way, especially the teacher or instructor. But then I strongly believe that we are dealing with adult learning principle, so we really can't challenge him or her to kind of change overnight and write. So I think that is part one thing we need to kind of accept and digest, saying that we really can't have the pace and direction. We have no right or maybe no power to kind of change the principle. So I think it is both of, it's painful at the same time, that's the reality. So it's how you take it.
Can I just tell a story and then, because I think it adds to the story. And the story is this. We were doing a survey of, we were interested in how use of mobile technologies and the role that gender plays in use of mobile technologies. So we were looking at primarily women who travel, who themselves are mobile from their rural backgrounds to cities, and they go and work over there and come back to their areas. So we did a survey out there, and there was this, again, a very, very interesting interview about this woman. And she said, no, I just use my mobile phone for calling. So the everyday practice seems to be very mundane, but it's interesting because the everyday is interesting. So she said, I use it for sometimes SMSing, I use it for calling, on receiving phone calls. And then, as usual, it happens. After the interview got over, we were packing, and we got up, and one of my colleagues said, oh, you've got 2 mobile phones. And she says, yes, yes. And we had turned off everything. It was not recorded. So we said, why do you have 2 mobile phones? So she said, well, this basic phone I use in the village because people don't like it over here if I use Facebook or Twitter. The other phone, when I'm traveling for work on the train, I switch it on just to access my Facebook and Twitter. So people are aware of registers in a certain way. So yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am. Yeah, very true. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, sir. Thank you for presenting such a topic, that social use of technologies and instrumental. As I am working as a teacher trainer, so don't we think that we have spread such a message to our education system, that we should, as we also think that we have to use technology according to the level and needs of the student as necessary. So I think we should use technology, but we should keep in mind all needs and socializing also.
Thank you. Can we have 2 more questions? Yeah? Okay, 3. Can you just keep your questions brief? We just have 4 minutes to go.
Sure. Bhattacharya ji, very...
Keep your mic closer.
A very excellent presentation. I really agree with techniques and the terms you have mentioned, that's magister and pedagogy, must come together. They, under the imperialistic rule or colonialistic rule, the language itself has no spelling rules, so students cannot be really restricted to particular spelling rules. Now it has been happening because of the global impact of the digital literacy, and we should accept.
Do you have a question or a comment, please?
No,
if you can ask.
I agree. So most of the students are really appreciating that sort of.
Can we take the questions from there?
The value testing evaluation, being the teachers, that point of view, were not able to judge them. That must be given impetus, certain project or these people, to the level of curriculum, to the academic curriculum. She is quite unaware. That's true with most of the English fraternity teachers. But the students are like that. They've been really exposed. They are very entertained, infotained, and whatnot.
Okay,
and
thank you.
The teachers have been very
Thank you. You can extend your dialogue at lunch. Can we have questions, please, so that Atanu can address? We have one,
I just
two,
wanted
three
to ask, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about the blog system. My school has been wanting to start a student blog since like a couple of months now, and I've been working on it. So can you give us some tips? Because you said teachers shouldn't be intervening at that particular point, and I'm very sure that kind of a situation will come up. So is there something that you would want to talk about?
Okay, thank you.
I will draw your attention to your last concluding statement, digitalize pedagogy and pedagogize the digital. Don't you think as teachers and practitioners, we need to be discreet and discriminate about what and how much to digitalize and how much to pedagogize?
Okay, thank you, sir. We have a question at the back, and I think Kalyan also has a question.
I think Atanu better answer these questions because I want him to to go back to the slides, because I have some observations on the slides.
Okay, I don't think we have that much time. Just take a question, and I think thereafter the questions can be addressed at the lunch. Yeah.
I just want to know that the farmer who turned on the pump in the field, how did you do this? Because I mean, what's the technology? It's more than this thing mobile.
I'll just very quickly take it because I've been warned that it's just 1 minute now, I guess. Education policy, I completely agree with you that the policy, that's what I said, that policymakers need to take this into consideration, that both the instrumental and the social will have to be taken into consideration. I think your point was about assessment. How do we assess this? I don't know. So we probably need new evaluation frameworks to assess this. Blogs, I think we can carry this over lunch. And sir, I would tend to agree with you that, of course, we need to be cautious. It cannot be simply digitalize and then disappear. I think I'll go by what Nikki said in the morning, the 80-20 rule. So 80% of teacher education and 20% or less for technology.
I'm sorry, I'll tell you the story later.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we thank Atanu for enlightening us with digital technology. Okay, Kalyan. Okay. We have...
Atanu, you introduced the concept of framing. Now, framing, as I understand, that is used in different ways in different contexts, and it has different connotations. For example, when you are using blogs with your students, the teacher actually intervened, and there is a kind of a pedagogical framing there, right? And also, there is a kind of a discoursal framing, which is also embedded there. Now, what do you think? Meaning, do you think that there are other instances of such multimodal kind of a framing involved in what is actually being produced by the students? That's it. That's my questions. And just a quick comment is, so for example, I don't know whether you have noticed, you see that as I see it, is most of these digital literacy practices these days are actually from different sites. So when the students actually do some activities or meaning they produce different things and they draw on different stuff. And it's a kind of a combination of both the print and the text. And what you actually have produced, both in the mobile version and etc. So what we see them as a kind of an embedding of socio-material assemblages.
Thank you.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I mean, and no, my point is not that they are not. My point is that we don't look at them. So I think pedagogic frameworks will have to look at those assemblages more seriously and then see how we can change them. Yeah.
Thank you, Atanu. Let's give Atanu a huge round of applause. Thank you, Atanu. Thank you.